Hey guys, another video for our How to Do Stuff in Japan playlist in our mini-series on raising kids in Japan. We've sort of touched on this subject before in other videos. We had one video about shy boys and rude dudes, and also in one of these other ones about raising kids we mentioned this as well. But we thought we'd sort of really focus on it because it's something that if you happen to raise kids in Japan, you're going to be around other people with kids and you're bound to experience this for sure. Even for those of you who are just coming to Japan for a visit or going to come to spend some time in Japan, it's a good chance you might experience it as well, and it might really surprise you. So we like to mention things like this just because they're really a heads up. There's nothing that we really need to do, so it's on the how-to playlist, but it's not really that we need to do anything about it. It's more just a heads up so that when you do experience it, that you know that you knew about it first. It just makes it easier if you hear about these things before you experience them. It can help you have a different or a better perhaps reaction to it when you experience it, because you've already heard about it, so you know it's not unique to what you're seeing. And that's the kids that perhaps could be considered to be really spoiled, and the tantrums that you'll experience associated with that. And it can be a real surprise the first couple of times you experience it. Even the 100th time you experience it, it can be a real surprise, because Japan is so organized, as you guys already know. The society is very orderly and very calm, and everybody sort of conforms and does the same thing, and it's very peaceful and non-confrontational, and Japanese people are really non-aggressive usually, and so all those things about Japanese society that we know about, and then when you experience this particular thing, it can be a real surprise. It's like, whoa, you know, because it just doesn't seem to fit. So it seems that, and of course, just to clarify first too, you will come across parents in Japan who have raised their kids beautifully, and their kids are very polite, calm, intelligent, delightful kids. You know, there's some really, of course, there are some extremely delightful kids who've been raised by some extremely delightful parents in Japan, and an absolute pleasure to be around, you know, no doubt about it. So definitely. But it also seems that at the moment, for whatever reason, that kids, particularly up to high school, so elementary school kids and younger, seem to be given free range by their parents quite often. And it's quite often you'll see kids doing things or behaving in certain ways, and the parents just seem to be oblivious to it, just seem to be ignoring it. And you'll hear other foreigners who have kids in Japan will sometimes mention this, because they'll be with them, their kids will be together, and the kids will do something radical, and the parents just sort of watch and laugh and don't respond to it, and it'll sort of let them free range. There's all sorts of theories as to why this is the case. Some people say it's because from high school on, Japanese life is really regimented and controlled, and so that some parents think that just letting the kids when they're younger just free range is sort of their time to be free and do whatever they want to do. Some people say that's it, that's the reason. Whether that's the reason or not, who knows, but this video is really, as with most of our videos, is really just observational. So it's just to tell you what we see. And what we see is just some parents who just let the kids do whatever they want, and that's all good when everybody's happy. But what we also see is when kids want to do something, or they're not happy with something, and in particular they've been told that they can't do something by somebody, whether it be another parent or by a teacher or by someone else has told them, or a parent has told them that they can't do something or can't have something, or just some. So the examples I'm thinking of are things that can't be helped. It's like they want to do something, but that particular day it's not possible, or, you know, things that aren't even in the parents' control. And these are the sort of tantrums those people who've been around 2-year-old kids will know. 2-year-olds can be like that. They're totally irrational. They want this thing, you tell them it's not possible, and they just throw a tantrum and scream and rant and rave and kick. And it's what 2-year-olds do. But here you will experience kids of 6, 7, 8, 10, 11 years old who'll do that. Who'll cry and scream and rant and rave when they can't get what they want, and hit parents. We've got lots of people we know, and we've seen this so many times, 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds, 8-year-olds, 10-year-olds, who will rant and rave and scream and kick and hit their parents, and actually become really physical, and then the parents just go, oh no, don't, stop, don't, and just not effective at all. And the kids just rant and rave and hit their parents and hit their parents and hit their grandparents. There's one I'm thinking of, who kids, 10-year-old kids, and they hit the grandparents and they hit the mother, and the mother and the grandparents just go, oh, stop, and don't stop them doing it. And there seems to be no consequences, and as a result, that's why they continue doing it, of course. They probably started doing it when they were 2 years old, and they've just continued, because no one stopped them doing it. No one sat them down and told them that it's unacceptable and that assaulting people is not on, and so as a result they just continue to do it. And the worst thing in the world is if you end up with a kid like this in your life. So if there's some connection between you, family connection or friends connection or work connection or something, with a family that has a kid like this, it can be really horrible, because they'll treat you the same way. I mean, I've had 10-year-old, 11-year-old boys just stand in my face and be rude and abusive and call me names and all sorts of things, which in a lot of other countries they wouldn't dare, would they? Because stand there and talk to a guy that's 5 times their size and be abusive and rude and stuff. And absolutely, and it'll surprise the hell out of you if you do experience it firsthand like that and you haven't heard about this. It'll surprise the heck out of you, because in Japan everybody's so polite and lovely to be around. So it stands out even more, because everyone's so polite and non-confrontational. We don't see confrontation in Japan. You don't see confrontation usually. You don't see confrontation. You don't see violence. You don't hear people arguing. There's nothing that upsets the harmony. So we get so used to that. So we just, it's been years since I've seen adults arguing or heard violence or seen violence or anything, and you just don't see it, don't experience it usually. And then suddenly you get some 11-year-old kids screaming and ranting and raving and being violent, throwing things and breaking things and hitting people and carrying on, and the parents just, and just don't seem to get it. So it's a real tricky one, and if you've got kids too, and you're sort of connected with these people, whether it be the same school or the same kindergarten or whatever it is, it can be really sort of a shock. It can be a real surprise, and it can be, a bit hard to take sometimes. So there's not much you can do about it. The parents that allow it to happen just don't seem to see. They just don't seem to be able to see. They just sort of accept it and just don't. I don't know. It's hard to understand why they so happily accept it. It's just what he does, they say, and he does that sometimes, and that's it. They don't sort of get it, and they won't get it. If you try, and there's nothing you can say or do about it. So again, this isn't really a video that you need to do anything except that. Be aware that this sort of stuff happens, and then if you do happen to experience it, don't be surprised, because what often happens is the first couple of times you experience this, you think it's just that particular person or that particular family or whatever, whereas in actual fact it's really common. We've experienced this a lot with this parents just and the kids are hitting them, and the parents going It's sort of interesting, because to some people from some countries this sort of stuff is surprising, because in some people from some countries things like violence, not accepting violence in any way from anybody, nobody hits anybody. In a lot of cultures now, we've sort of evolved to a point where that any sort of violence is unacceptable. Whereas here, as we've mentioned on previous videos, in a lot of ways, socially, Japan can be really old style, when it comes to things like this. In technology and things, they're really advanced, but when it comes to social and personal interaction and psychology in particular, and you'll notice this keeps coming up with these videos about raising kids, psychology in Japan is really, really back in the 50s. An awareness of psychology, an awareness of human relations type psychology and things that we've been talking about in other countries for 50, 60 years, mainstream. It's been mainstream for a long time. Whereas in Japan, it seems to be a real lack of understanding of human psychology and human behavioural type things. It's possibly because nobody sort of thinks about it, because it's all about programming. So everybody's programmed to do the same thing. So everybody just copies what everybody else does, sort of thing, or follows someone above them. And there's no sort of cognitive thinking, or you don't sort of get people reading books on child psychology, raising kids, or talking about it. When you get parents together, they don't really sort of sit around and talk about, well, I've got a problem with this. My son keeps hitting me, or my daughter keeps being violent and hitting me, and I don't know what to do about it. And people don't sort of sit around and talk about it like that, because it'd be too embarrassing and too self-absorbed, and they couldn't do that. So they all sit around and talk about sort of unimportant things instead, non-confrontational, non-embarrassing, non-sort of sensitive topics, all sorts of just talk about the weather and, stuff like that. So it's a tricky one, and again, that's probably one bit of advice there, is don't talk about it, because it wouldn't go down well if you do say, wow, what's going on with your daughter there, or what's going on with your son or something. It wouldn't go down well. They wouldn't be comfortable, they'd be embarrassed and they'd be uncomfortable and that sort of thing. So, you get tempted sometimes, when you see particularly old people like us, like me, when you see younger parents, with kids, and you can see where it's going wrong. It's not hard to work it out. I mean, you just have to, you'd have to start with a rule of no violence in the family, wouldn't you? Look, it's across the blanket rule, nobody hits anybody in our family, and that's the rule, which for most of us is normal. Whereas here, they wouldn't have thought to say that to the kids, And you get tempted to say to them, look, have you said to him that it's not acceptable? But you just can't. So the one piece of advice in this video is, if you do experience this stuff for yourself, don't be tempted to say anything, because it'll just make the situation worse. It won't fix it. You can't bring 21st century psychology and human relations type thinking into a country where it's still back in the 50s when it comes to that sort of stuff, and you're not going to be able to do it. As tempting as it is to say something and to try and help. And that's often your instinct, when you see young parents with kids that are beating them up, it's tempting to try and help in some way, to say something or do something to help solve it for them, help them solve it, but it won't work, it'll just make it worse. So all you can really do is just know that it happens. When you see it, go, oh yeah, it's one of those situations, and just stay out of it. And if you have to, you might be able to avoid those people. I mean, we've got people like that where, we just can't be around them because it's just too much. It's just screaming, ranting, raving, throwing things, hitting the parents, hitting the grandparents. They usually don't hit other people. What's interesting, they just usually hit the other family members. But a 10-year-old boy hitting his mother, like punching his mother, is a bit of a hard thing to be around, and you won't fix it. So if you don't like it, well, your only real option is try and stay away from it, So it's surprising, isn't it? But there it is. And hopefully, because of this video, if you do experience it, you'll be a little bit less surprised. Those of you who won't be living in Japan, those of you who just visit Japan, you might experience this. You might see it in a supermarket or something. Some parent trying to drag some kid out of the supermarket, and the 10-year-old kid standing there hitting the parents. It's a chance you'll see it. So don't be surprised if you do. You'll just remember this video and go, oh yeah, I heard about this. spoiled kids. And again, it's not the kids are just kids, you know, it's the way that they're being raised, some of them, you know, it's just the way they're being raised. So there it was. Anyway, hopefully someone found that interesting, if not a little disturbing. More videos coming soon.